What if everything you think is real isn't? Not in a conspiracy theory way, not in a simulation way, in a way that Harvard, Kant, and modern neuroscience all agree on. In 1781, a German philosopher named Immanuel Kant wrote something so radical, so unsettling, that it took the academic world decades to fully absorb it. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, that you have never, not once in your entire life, experienced reality as it actually is. Let that sit for a second. Every decision you've ever made, every belief you hold, every reason you tell yourself for why you're stuck, why you're broke, why things haven't worked out the way you planned, all of it, filtered, distorted, incomplete. And here's what makes that terrifying. The habits keeping most people broke and stuck aren't just behavioral, they're perceptual. They live in the gap between what is real and what your mind tells you is real. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't just see your habits differently, you'll see yourself differently. The Kant problem. You don't see reality. Let's start with Immanuel Kant, because everything else in this video builds on what he discovered. Kant made a distinction that most people never encounter outside of a philosophy classroom. He separated the world into two categories, the phenomena and the noumena. The phenomena is the world as you experience it, the colors you see, the sounds you hear, the emotions you feel, the story you tell yourself about your life. The noumena is the world as it actually is, raw, unfiltered, independent of your perception. And Kant's argument, which has never been successfully refuted, is that you can never access the noumena directly. Your brain does not show you reality. It shows you a construction of reality, built from your past experiences, your fears, your culture, your conditioning, and your biology. In other words, you live inside a model of the world, not the world itself. Now here's where this gets personal. When you look at your bank account and feel hopeless, you are not seeing your financial situation as it is. You are seeing it through the lens of every money conversation you heard growing up, through every failure you've experienced, through every story you've absorbed about people like you. When you look at someone successful and feel like they have something you don't, you are not seeing them clearly. You are seeing them through a filter of comparison, inadequacy, and assumptions you've never questioned. Kant called our mental filters the categories of understanding. Neuroscience today calls them cognitive schemas. The terminology changes. The truth doesn't. You are not experiencing life. You are experiencing your interpretation of life. And until you understand that, you will keep making decisions based on a map that doesn't match the territory. Habit 1. Consuming without creating. The first silent habit follows directly from Kant's insight. When you spend the majority of your time consuming, scrolling, watching, listening, reading, without producing anything in return, you are doing something more dangerous than just wasting time. You are outsourcing your phenomena to other people. You are letting others build your mental model of reality for you. Ryan Holiday, in his book Ego is the Enemy, writes that the most dangerous state a person can be in is the state of motion without action. Motion feels like progress. Watching a documentary about entrepreneurship feels productive. Reading another self-help book feels like growth. But Kant would say, you are still trapped in someone else's phenomena. You are consuming their filtered version of reality without creating your own. The research backs this up brutally. A study from the University of California found that the average person now consumes over 74 gigabytes of information per day. That's the equivalent of reading 16 books every single day. And yet, personal savings rates are near historic lows. Mental health crises are at an all-time high. People have never been more informed and less transformed. Because information without creation is just noise wearing the costume of wisdom. The ancient Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, one of the most powerful men in human history, wrote in his private journal what we now call meditations. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one. Not read about it, not watch videos about it, be one. Every hour you spend consuming without creating, you are training your brain to be a passenger in your own life. And passengers don't build wealth. They don't build legacies. They watch others do it from the window. Habit 2. Mistaking comfort for safety. Here is one of the most dangerous lies your brain tells you, that comfortable equals safe. It doesn't, and the science is almost cruel in how clearly it proves this. In psychology, there's a concept called the adaptation principle. It describes how humans rapidly adjust to new circumstances, positive or negative, and return to a baseline emotional state. What this means practically is devastating. That job that feels fine, that relationship that's okay, that financial situation that's manageable, your brain has adapted to them. They no longer feel uncomfortable, so your threat detection system goes quiet. But quiet is not the same as good. Nassim Nicholas Taleb, in his masterpiece Anti-Fragile, describes what he calls the turkey problem. A turkey is fed every day for 1,000 days. Each day that passes, the turkey's confidence in its safety grows. The data supports it. Every single day has been fine. And then comes day 1001, Thanksgiving. The very thing that made the turkey feel safe, the pattern of comfort, was the thing that made it completely blind to the danger it was in. Most people are living the turkey problem right now. They are in jobs that feel stable but are slowly dying. In habits that feel normal but are compounding damage. In mindsets that feel natural but were handed to them by someone else. Kant would say they are fully immersed in their phenomena, in their constructed experience of reality, without ever questioning whether the noumena, the actual reality, is something entirely different. Safety is not how something feels. Safety is what the data says when you look honestly. And most people never look honestly, because the looking is uncomfortable, and they've mistaken comfort for safety. Habit 3. The language you use about money. This is the one. Pay attention. In 1996, linguist George Lakoff published Moral Politics, and what he found about the relationship between language and thought changed everything. Lakoff's central argument, backed by decades of research, is that language doesn't just describe your thoughts. Language creates your thoughts. The words you use, especially habitually, literally wire your brain into specific patterns of thinking. And nowhere is this more devastatingly true than in how people talk about money. There are two phrases that look almost identical on the surface, but produce completely opposite neurological responses. I can't afford this, versus, how can I afford this? When you say, I can't afford this, your prefrontal cortex, the problem-solving center of your brain, receives a signal that the problem is closed, resolved. Your brain stops generating solutions because you've told it the matter is settled. When you say, how can I afford this? You open a loop. Your brain, which is obsessed with closing open loops, begins to search for answers, automatically, even when you're not consciously thinking about it. This isn't motivational fluff. This is how the reticular activating system works. Your RAS is a bundle of nerves in your brainstem that acts as a filter, deciding what information your conscious mind pays attention to. When you program it with closed statements, I can't, I'm not, I'll never, it filters out opportunities, solutions, and possibilities. Not because they don't exist, because you've told it they're not worth looking for. James Allen wrote in As a Man Thinketh in 1903, a man's mind may be likened to a garden, which may be intelligently cultivated or allowed to run wild. But whether cultivated or neglected, it must and will bring forth. The garden of your mind is producing something right now. The question is whether you planted those seeds intentionally or whether someone else did. Habit 4. Urgency addiction. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You have a task, something important, something that could genuinely move your life forward, and it sits there for days, weeks, sometimes months, untouched. And then, a deadline appears, or a crisis, or someone is depending on you right now, and suddenly, you become capable of extraordinary focus and output. You think this is a productivity problem. It isn't. It's a neurological addiction to urgency. Dr. Judson Brewer, director of research at the Mindfulness Center at Brown University, has spent years studying the neurological basis of habit loops. His research shows that urgency, the feeling of a deadline, a threat, a crisis, triggers the same dopaminergic reward pathways as other addictions. In other words, your brain has been trained to require stress in order to perform. And like all addictions, the tolerance builds. You need bigger deadlines, more pressure, higher stakes, just to feel the motivation that should be available to you every day. Kant would frame this as a phenomena problem. Your subjective experience of needing urgency to work feels like a personality trait, a fixed part of who you are. But the noumena, the actual reality, is that it's a conditioned response, a habit, entirely changeable. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote in Letters from a Stoic, "Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est." Everything is alien to us. Only time is truly ours. And yet, urgency addiction is the single greatest thief of time in the modern world. Because people spend 80% of their time in reactive mode, responding to what is pressing, and almost no time on what is important. The solution isn't discipline in the traditional sense. It's learning to manufacture intrinsic urgency, purpose-driven deadlines, self-imposed stakes, the ability to make the important feel urgent before it becomes critical. Habit 5. Invisible social mirroring. In the 1990s, Italian neuroscientists accidentally discovered something that rewrote our understanding of human behavior. They were studying the brain of a macaque monkey, and they noticed something strange. When the monkey watched a scientist pick up a piece of food, without doing anything itself, the same neurons fired in the monkey's brain as when the monkey picked up food itself. They called them mirror neurons. And subsequent research confirmed they exist in humans too, and they are far more powerful in us than in any other species. Here is what this means for your life, practically and immediately. Your brain is constantly, automatically, unconsciously mirroring the people around you. Not just their actions, their emotional states, their energy levels, their relationship with money, their ambitions, their limitations. You don't choose to do this. It happens below the level of conscious awareness. Jim Rohn said, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." That quote has been repeated so many times it's become a cliché. But most people don't understand the mechanism behind it. It's not inspirational, it's neurological. If you spend your time around people who complain about money, your mirror neurons encode complaining about money as normal behavior. If you spend your time around people who are building something, your mirror neurons encode building as normal. Robert Greene, in The Laws of Human Nature, calls this the law of covetousness in reverse. We don't just want what others have, we unconsciously become what others are. Kant would say the people around you are actively shaping your phenomena, your constructed experience of what is possible, what is normal, and what you are capable of. The question is not whether this is happening to you, it is. The question is whether you are choosing who shapes your reality or letting it happen by default. Habit 6. Dopamine hijacking. In 2012, neuroscientist Kent Berridge at the University of Michigan made a critical distinction that the entire modern tech industry would prefer you never learn. The distinction between wanting and liking. These are 2 separate neurological systems. Dopamine, the molecule that drives behavior, is not actually the pleasure chemical. It is the wanting chemical. It drives you toward things before you have them. The actual experience of pleasure, the liking, is mediated by opioid systems, entirely separate. What this means is that you can want something intensely, pursue it compulsively, and feel almost nothing when you get it. Sound familiar? The entire architecture of social media, infinite scroll, variable reward notifications, likes, comments, follower counts, is built on hijacking the wanting system. It gives you just enough to keep wanting more, without ever satisfying the liking system. And here is the invisible damage this does over time. When your dopamine system is constantly firing at high frequency for small, easy rewards, a notification, a like, a funny video, it recalibrates. It raises your hedonic baseline. And suddenly, the slow, unglamorous, unrewarded work of building something real, starting a business, developing a skill, investing consistently, feels neurologically intolerable. Not difficult, intolerable. Like your brain is screaming at you to stop. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps and wrote Man's Search for Meaning, observed that humans can endure almost any suffering as long as they have a why. But dopamine hijacking destroys the why. It replaces deep, meaning-driven motivation with shallow, stimulus-driven compulsion. And once that switch is flipped, building anything that matters becomes a neurological battle fought against an algorithm with billions of dollars and the world's best engineers on the other side. The first step is simply knowing the game being played with your attention. You cannot opt out of a game you don't know you're in. Habit 7. Waiting for the right moment. There is a story about the great Stoic philosopher Zeno of Citium. He was shipwrecked. He lost everything. And in that moment of total loss, he walked into a bookshop in Athens, began reading Socrates, and said, "Where can I find a man like this?" He was directed to Crates, a philosopher walking by outside. He followed him, and what began in that moment of loss became the entire Stoic philosophical tradition, one of the most influential schools of thought in human history. He did not wait for the right moment. He responded to the moment he was given. Behavioral economists call the pattern of waiting temporal discounting, the tendency to assign less value to future rewards compared to present ones. $1 today feels worth more than $1 tomorrow, even when the math says otherwise. But temporal discounting in habits is more sinister than in finances, because every time you say, "I'll start Monday," your brain doesn't just delay the action, it gets slightly better at delaying. The neural pathway for procrastination gets reinforced. The habit of waiting becomes easier, more automatic, more default. And this compounds, silently, invisibly, over years and decades. William James, the father of American psychology, wrote in 1890, "The hell to be endured hereafter, of which theology tells, is no worse than the hell we make for ourselves in this world by habitually fashioning our characters in the wrong way." The wrong way is waiting. The right moment you're waiting for is a phenomena, a construction of your mind, a future state that will never arrive exactly as imagined, because reality, the noumena, doesn't operate on your timeline. The right moment is always some version of now, imperfect, incomplete, uncertain. That's not motivational advice. That's the structure of reality. Closing. The truth. TruthLens was built on... Let's come back to Kant. He spent his entire life trying to map the boundary between what we can know and what we cannot, between the world we experience and the world that actually exists. And what he concluded, after decades of rigorous, almost obsessive philosophical work, was both humbling and liberating. We cannot access ultimate reality directly, but we are not helpless inside our phenomena either, because awareness changes perception, and changed perception changes everything. When you become aware that your brain is showing you a constructed reality, you gain the ability to question the construction, to ask, is this belief true or was it handed to me? Is this limitation real or is it a filter I forgot I was wearing? The 7 habits we covered today, consuming without creating, mistaking comfort for safety, disempowering money language, urgency addiction, unconscious social mirroring, dopamine hijacking, and waiting for the right moment. None of them are character flaws. They are constructions, phenomena, built by experience, reinforced by repetition, mistaken for identity. And constructions can be rebuilt. Marcus Aurelius, a man who ran an empire, fought wars, buried children, and still found time to write philosophy every morning before sunrise, put it simply: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Not power over reality, power over the lens through which you see it. That is where everything begins. If this video reached something in you that most content doesn't, that's not an accident. That's what TruthLens is here for. Subscribe, because next time, we go deeper. And watch this video next, because what comes after awareness is the part most people never reach.